The crystal chandeliers of the Coral Gables Country Club were blinding, reflecting off 200 wine glasses like tiny, jagged diamonds. It was my parents' 40th anniversary. A night that was supposed to be about legacy and love. Instead, I felt like a ghost haunting my own family's celebration. I was standing near the buffet when my sister, Nadine, drifted toward me. She looked perfect in her silk designer gown, holding a glass of expensive Cabernet. Beside her stood the billionaire investor my father had been chasing for months. Nadine didn't smile. She didn't even look at me as she tripped on the marble floor. The deep red wine splashed across my pale dress, soaking through the fabric like a fresh wound. I stood there, dripping, as the room went dead silent. Nadine let out a practiced, shallow gasp, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of grapes and malice. She whispered so only I could hear, "I dare you to disappear for a few days, Isla. Let's see if even a dog misses you." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even reach for a napkin. I just looked her straight in the eye, my skin feeling like ice. "Challenge accepted," I said. My voice was steady, hitting the air with the weight of a closing gavel. I turned and walked toward the exit, the wet silk heavy against my legs. I didn't look back at my father's red face or my mother's downward gaze. I walked out into the humid Florida night, leaving the music and the lies behind me. The challenge was on. But Nadine had no idea that I wasn't just disappearing. I was finally waking up. The cool night air of Coral Gables hit my face, but it didn't stop the stinging heat of humiliation beneath my skin. I climbed into the 1985 Mercedes-Benz 300D, the interior smelling like old leather and the faint, lingering scent of my grandmother's lavender perfume. It was the only thing she had managed to keep in her own name before she passed. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 32 years old. That was my age. But tonight, sitting in that parking lot with wine soaking into my slip, I felt like the same invisible 12-year-old who used to hide in the pantry to avoid Nadine's taunts. For 10 years, I was the one who sat in that cramped hospice room. I was the one who changed the ice chips and listened to the raspy stories of a life nearly gone. Julian and Nadine, they were always closing a deal or attending a fundraiser. They called my grandmother a legacy burden. But the real knife in the back happened 3 years ago. I was working 3 freelance jobs, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and caffeine. Julian sat me down, looking every bit the concerned father. He handed me a stack of papers, a disclaimer of interest, he called it. He told me it was just a legal formality to help him manage a small, overgrown plot of land Banoy owned. I was too tired to fight. I trusted the man who raised me. I signed it. What I didn't know then was that Julian wasn't trying to manage land. He was trying to erase me from the map entirely. He thought he'd successfully tricked me into handing over my future so he could fund Nadine's social climbing. I looked at the thick cream envelope sitting on the passenger seat, the one the law firm had sent me last week. They thought they broke me back then, but they forgot one thing. I was the only one who truly listened to Banoy, and she had a plan they never saw coming. I started the engine. The old diesel roared to life, steady and loud. They wanted me to disappear? Fine. But when I come back, I'm the one holding the hammer. I didn't waste time trying to guess passwords or hack into Julian's encrypted files. That's for movies. In the real world, you just wait for people to get comfortable. My father is a creature of habit. He thinks he's a genius, but he's just predictable. Last month, under the guise of my landscaping business, I gifted him a state-of-the-art smart irrigation system for the garden. I told him it was for his precious orchids. What I didn't tell him was that the system acted as a bridge to the house Wi-Fi. Every morning, Julian sits in the gazebo with his cigar and his tablet, logging into his private accounts. One glance at my screen from the apartment downtown confirmed it. I had his keystrokes. I had his passwords. But the real gold wasn't digital. It was in a leather-bound ledger he kept in his desk. I met with a man named Marcus, an independent trustee for the Padilla Family Trust. He sat across from me in a gray suit that looked like it cost more than Julian's car. He didn't offer me pity. He offered me facts. He told me Banoy was 10 steps ahead of everyone. She had inserted a spendthrift provision into her irrevocable trust. It was a legal kill switch. If the primary trustee, my father, ever attempted to defraud a beneficiary or use the trust's capital to cover personal business debts, he was out. Automatically. No discussion. Marcus slid a folder across the table. One glance at the balances made my breath hitch. $12 million in combined assets. The house, the land, the liquid funds, all of it was currently being drained by Julian to prop up his failing construction firm. He's bleeding it dry, Isla, Marcus said. He thinks because you signed that disclaimer, the door is locked. He doesn't realize the hinges are rotten. I looked at the screen of my laptop. Through the Nest camera, I'd reactivated the one Banoi let me use to check on her when she was sick. I watched Julian in the gazebo. He was hunched over his ledger, scribbling numbers with a shaky hand. He looked small. He wasn't a titan. He was just a thief in a silk tie. And he had no idea that while he was busy trying to make me disappear, I was busy making sure he'd never be able to show his face in this town again. Julian and Nadine didn't just think I was gone. They thought I was erased. Within a week of the gala, they announced an exclusive estate sale. They were trying to sell the Coral Gables mansion, the very roof over their heads, to liquidate the equity and dump it into Julian's hemorrhaging construction firm. It was a desperate, illegal move. They didn't technically own the walls they were standing within. I watched them through the Nest feed. Julian was pacing the marble floors, practicing his pitch for the billionaire investors. Nadine was busy tagging Banoi's antique furniture with price stickers. They looked like vultures picking at a carcass that was still warm. But then, my mother, Martha, did something that shifted the entire game. For 35 years, she had been a shadow, agreeing with Julian just to keep the peace. But 2 days after the gala, I sent her a single audio file. It was a recording from the gazebo. Julian and Nadine were laughing, their voices sharp and clear over the sound of clinking Scotch glasses. Julian was saying, "Once the house sells, we'll move Martha into that budget facility near the interstate. She won't know the difference. And it'll save us $3,000 a month." Nadine's response was a cold giggle. "She's lived in luxury long enough. It's our turn now." That night, Martha didn't cry. She didn't confront them. She waited until Julian passed out from his third glass of Macallan. Then she took the master key from his bedside table. She walked into his private office, opened the mahogany filing cabinet, and pulled out the physical ledgers, the double books Julian used to hide the trust fund thefts. She met me at a diner on the edge of town at 3 a.m. Her hands were shaking as she slid the heavy leather binder across the formica table. "Isla," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I've spent my life being quiet. I thought if I stayed silent, the fire wouldn't touch me. But they were planning to burn me alive." I gripped her hand. "The fire is out, Mom. I'm the one holding the hose now." I opened the ledger. Every forged signature, every loan Julian had taken from the trust to pay off his predatory lenders, it was all there. Julian and Nadine were so convinced of their own brilliance that they'd left a paper trail a mile long. They thought they were the predators. They didn't realize I was already at the door. The exclusive estate sale was held on a humid Saturday afternoon. The driveway of the Coral Gables mansion was choked with luxury SUVs. Inside, 200 of the city's elite wandered through the halls, wine glasses in hand, eyeing my grandmother's French antiques, as if they were picking over a corpse. Julian stood at the top of the grand staircase, wearing his most expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Beside him, Nadine was playing the part of the grieving but resilient daughter, whispering to a billionaire investor about how painful it was to let go of these family treasures. I waited until the lead auctioneer raised his gavel to open the bidding on the house itself, the centerpiece of Julian's desperate scam. I didn't sneak in. I walked through the front doors with Marcus, the independent trustee, and 2 forensic auditors in dark suits. The room didn't just go quiet. It felt like the air had been sucked out of it. "The auction is over," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. "This house is no longer for sale." Julian's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. "Isla? What is this embarrassment? Get out, before I have security throw you out." "Actually, Julian," Marcus stepped forward, his voice like cold stone. "We're the ones with security. And we're the ones with the warrant." I didn't waste breath arguing. I walked over to the large media screen Nadine had set up to showcase the property. With one tap on my phone, the smart irrigation feed from the garden gazebo flared onto the screen. The entire room watched as the video played. Julian, hunched over his desk, admitting to Nadine that he had forged my signature to bleed the trust dry. The audio was crisp, capturing the exact moment he laughed about erasing me. The billionaire investor stepped back from Julian as if he were contagious. Julian's reputation didn't just crack, it atomized. He tried to lung for the screen, but the auditors intercepted him. Based on the spendthrift provision of the Padilla Irrevocable Trust, Marcus announced to the stunned crowd, "Julian Padilla is hereby removed as trustee for gross financial misconduct and fraud. Effective immediately. Isla Padilla is the sole administrator of this estate." Nadine let out a shrill, piercing scream. "You can't do this. This is my house. I have status." Marcus didn't blink. He handed her a legal document. "This is a 24-hour notice of eviction. You have until noon tomorrow to remove your personal effects. Anything left behind becomes the property of the trust." I looked at my sister. Her perfect hair was disheveled, and the fear in her eyes was the most honest thing I'd ever seen from her. I leaned in, just like she had at the gala. "I took your challenge, Nadine," I whispered. I disappeared. And while I was gone, I made sure you'd never have a place to hide again. The chaos that followed was a blur of high-end panic and legal iron. Julian tried to fake a cardiac event right there on the Persian rug, clutching his chest and gasping for air while the billionaire investor watched in disgust. It was a classic Julian move, the ultimate play for pity. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. Julian was mid-groan when I stepped forward and handed the lead EMT my phone. "Don't bother with the adrenaline," I said coldly. "He was drinking double scotches and laughing about his offshore accounts on my live stream 5 minutes before you arrived. His heart is fine. It's his conscience that's failing." The paramedics checked his vitals, found them perfect, and left him sitting on the floor in total humiliation. Julian looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a giant. I saw a small, scared man whose mask had finally melted off. My mother, Martha, didn't wait for the dust to settle. She walked out of the house that evening with one suitcase and the physical ledgers. She filed for divorce the next morning, citing 3 decades of financial abuse. Because Julian had breached the trust, he had no legal shield. The court stripped him of his remaining personal assets to pay back the loans he had stolen from Banoi's fund. Nadine fared even worse. The socialite circle she had spent her life cultivating turned on her within 24 hours. You see, in Coral Gables, people will forgive a lot of things, but they won't forgive a loser who gets caught. She lost her marketing job after the firm's board saw the video of her helping Julian defraud the family trust. Last I heard, she was living in a studio apartment, wondering why her status couldn't pay her rent. I didn't stay to watch the house be cleared. I officially renamed the estate Hawthorne Gardens. I hired a crew, but I did the planting myself. I spent weeks digging into the soil, tearing out the weeds of the past, and replacing them with white roses and lavender, the things Banoi loved. I launched my own landscape design firm from the sunroom. It wasn't about the $12 million. It was about the fact that every time I walk through those gates, I'm not a ghost anymore. I'm the owner. Final shot. I'm standing in the center of the garden, the sun setting over the Florida palms. I reached into my pocket and pulled out that old disclaimer of interest Julian had tricked me into signing. I didn't rip it. I just dropped it into the small fire pit I'd built. I watched the paper curl and turn to ash, the wind carrying the last of their power away into the night. I was finally, fully, home. The dust has finally settled, and the silence in Hawthorne Gardens is no longer heavy, it's peaceful. But I didn't get here just because I was lucky or because I had a clever grandmother. I got here because I stopped playing by the rules of a game that was rigged against me from the start. The legal aftermath was clinical and absolute. Julian wasn't just removed. He was decimated. The forensic audit revealed he had misappropriated a total of $482,000 from the trust over the last 5 years. The court ordered immediate restitution. Since his construction firm was already circling the drain, the judge placed a lien on his remaining personal assets, including his collection of luxury watches and his country club membership. He didn't go to prison. But in his world, being broke and socially extinct is a far worse sentence. Nadine tried one last move. 3 months after the eviction, I received a handwritten letter from her. It wasn't an apology. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. She wrote, "Isla, I only challenged you because I wanted to motivate you. I knew you had greatness in you. And I played the villain so you could find your strength. Now that you're successful, isn't it time to bring your big sister home?" I didn't get angry. I didn't even feel that old familiar burn in my chest. I just stared at the elegant script for a moment, then tossed it into the recycling bin. Indifference is the ultimate power move. When you no longer care enough to even hate them, that's when you've truly won. Today, my life is filled with people who don't need a D-chook to see my worth. My mother, Martha, lives in a sun-drenched cottage 10 minutes away. We don't talk about the past every day, but we do talk about the future. I have a team of 12 employees who look to me for leadership, and a community that respects my work. I've built a chosen family of mentors and friends who treat me with the dignity I was denied for 30 years. If you're watching this and you feel like the invisible one, the spare child, the unappreciated employee, the friend who's always the last to be invited, hear me clearly. Blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. You are under no obligation to set yourself on fire just to keep people warm, who wouldn't even hand you a glass of water if you were parched. Rule number 1. Stop seeking a seat at a table where you're only on the menu. Rule number 2. Your silence isn't taking the high road. It's a green light for your boundary crossers. Speak up, or the world will keep stepping on you. Rule number 3. Real success isn't about the $12 million or the big house. It's about the moment you realize you are enough, exactly as you are, without anyone else's permission. I am Isla Padilla, and I am no longer disappearing. I am blooming. If this story reminded you of your own strength, like and subscribe. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to find yourself? Tell me your victory in the comments. I'm reading every single one.